All right, the valve adjustment or disassembly of the 400 GT begins. Took the carburetors out, and you know, it's just a lot of fasteners. You know, we got throttle linkages, carburetor, we got all sorts of stuff that needs to come out. Distributors have to come out again. All this stuff just to start getting to the valve covers. I mean, you could see where the intakes go, and they cross over the exhaust valves through the valve covers, and then goes into the intake valves, and that's the intake camshaft. I got the camshaft cover off, and a little dirty. It looks like it's missed a couple oil changes, but and the other thing is, you notice here all the intake runners are all kind of crusty, and the paint's peeling off of them also. I'm going to talk to the owner and say maybe this is the time with these off. We'll put some fresh wrinkle paint, and we also got to talk about the acorn nuts. They're pretty dark and rusty. Have to decide whether or not we should just send them out and get them replated. You know what happens is, and this is kind of what happens with a car with a lot of maintenance, is like when it doesn't get done, and then everything just kind of gets crustier and dirtier, and when you want to do it, when it's time to do it, now's the time to redo everything. I mean, look at the exhaust manifold covers. They're all greasy and dirty, and the valve covers are dirty and flaking. You know, it just wasn't really taken care of. But that's why sometimes just somebody who wants to do maintenance on the car, it ends up costing even more, because they want to make it nice, because they're the ones who are committed to making the car nicer. But then a normal valve adjustment ends up being a lot more expensive, because then you're repainting the valve covers, you're replating pieces because they're all crusty and ugly, because it wasn't done before, or wasn't taken care of, and it was let to kind of go to pot a little bit. So a lot of this stuff can cost more just simply because it's been deferred, and the person who wants to spend money on it ends up spending more money on it just simply because he wants it to look nice. But anyway, 400 GT is going ahead with its valve adjustment and check through, and just keep moving forward. All right, so got the valve covers off, and I think we found the source of the oil leaks. So there's a square cut O-ring that goes between the valve covers and the timing chest, and it's one piece. Well, this one's in, I think, 3 pieces. It was glued in with tons of RTV in here, and globbed up in there, and there was a big gap in here where there was no RTV in there, because without missing the gasket or missing that O-ring or square cut O-ring, you just have a complete opening where oil can go. You can almost see here, there's like this little gap. Well, on this side, there was a good, you know, half-inch gap here between the O-rings. So you can see on this side what I'm talking about. It's just got a ton of RTV just kind of globbed up in there, and they don't even have it in the space because there's a big old gap where the O-ring is. So there's no way that would have sealed. It would have just kept collecting oil. That's what it looks like when I took the valve cover off. So it's just kind of like hoping, you know, with a prayer that it was going to seal, and obviously it's not. So yep, that's probably the source of most of the oil leaks in the front of the engine. Well, I got the transmission out on the 400 GT. It was relatively straightforward. I mean, you know, it's got its own little challenges, but it's not that big of a deal. Once I got the rear end on this car unbolted, I just found it easier to just take it out. And while I had it out, I went ahead and power washed it, and I'll see how much I can clean it up and put things back. But you could see from the color change that leaky rear seal from the transmission was just dripping all the way back and coating everything with oil, which kind of helped a little bit, because where the oil did make it, it's kind of rusty. But the previous shop, I think, put a ton of RTV in here, hoping to stop that leak from the transmission. But I'm going to put a new seal in the transmission, and that should stop the leaking altogether. So I'm going to have to take that nut off and pull the seal off. But other than that, the transmission looks like it's in pretty good shape. Cleaned up the inside of the bell housing. The reason why I took the transmission out is because it needed a new clutch. And I'm also going to have to send the flywheel out for resurfacing. It's got couple little cracks in there. I think they'll come out with some machining. It looks like there's plenty of meat on the flywheel, so I'm going to send that out to have it surfaced, ground, and then we'll check from there. But I've got a new flywheel and pressure plate ready to go back in. So, and I was checking to make sure that I had the right clutch alignment tool. I've got that ready to go. So I've got a couple little seals, couple little leaks and things like that. So that's going on with the transmission. And then just working on getting the rest of the car done. I checked the valve flash, and valve flash looks pretty good. I mean, it looks like the last person that was in here had done the valve flash, but just did a really crappy job sealing everything up because it was leaking all over the place. So I think I'm going to have to figure out what to do here and seal it up a little bit better. But checked everything, and everything's in spec, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. The challenge for me is just to get this thing to stop leaking oil and clean it up a little bit, make it look a little nicer. But the good thing is I'm not going to be changing any shims on the camshafts. So I think the engine has to come out on this 400 GT. I've been taking a look at where the leaks are coming from. It's just like one of these things where everywhere I look, I just think that it's going to be easier to pull the engine. I mean, as much as I don't really want to pull the engine, there's just too many things going on that it's just telling me that I should probably just do it. Sometimes, as much as these cars are a pain in the butt to work on, it's easier to just bite the bullet and do the seals and do it the right way. Here's an example. So I have the flywheel off of the car and the rear main seal is leaking. So cleaned all this up and looked at it, and you could just pop this seal out, and that's okay. But it's also leaking from around this backside of this main bearing cap. I think that sometimes what it does is it leaks between the cap. And when I first got this car apart, I saw that the oil was dripping off of these main studs, the big studs down here. So sometimes that comes from just the cap itself, but also that cap captures the rear seal. So what happens is it could have been leaking from the rear seal, but it could also be leaking from between the cap and the main bearing. So there are a couple O-rings on these studs that could have been leaking. So, and the other thing is to open this cap a little bit and put the rear main seal in is probably the best way. That way I can clean it all up and make sure that it's seated well, and then tighten everything up. But on other cars, I can pull this cap off from while the engine is mounted. But when I was looking closer, there's a cross member back here. So I don't think there's enough clearance to pull the cap all the way down because of this cross member. Yeah, I could loosen the engine mount and I can jack the car up a little bit to clear this cap, but that's a possibility that could be a problem. Then facing the other side of the engine, I've got a seal leak on the main pulley seal. So that, and again, I've cleaned all this up and dried it off, but that seal, that means the nut has to come off of the main pulley. Well, you can't put an impact driver with all this stuff in the way, like the idler arm and all this other stuff in the front. So you have to pull the radiator out. That means you have to pull the oil cooler out, which means to disconnect all these lines, you got to drain the radiator. It's not that you're halfway there, but you're draining the radiator, you're pulling the oil lines out to take this front pulley seal off. And then that just gets the front seal off. So it's like, and you're fighting to get your hand in there because obviously with all this out of the way, it's still going to be a tight squeeze to get an impact gun in there. And then when we go up top, the seals, these O-ring seals that seal the timing case and they're kind of like camshaft seals, but they go between the timing chest and the head. These have been cut flush or ripped off or broken, and then they were glued in with a bunch of RTV. The problem with that is that's where all the leaks were coming from, and it was just leaking down here and covering everything and just kind of running back and getting everything greasy. Now, how do you fix that? Well, the timing chest has to lean forward to pull these out because they're kind of captured in place just from the pressure of the timing chest against the head. But that's not an easy thing to do. I've thought about loosening this timing chest and trying to pry it open, but if I crack this area, that's a big problem. You got to send that out for welding and all that other stuff. Not something that I want to do. The other problem with leaning this forward is that you could possibly have coolant leaks over here. You could see somebody's already smeared RTV in here, making a big mess trying to stop these oil leaks. But I don't know. I think the safest thing is to pull this engine, do it right. That way I can unbolt the front of the timing chest and reseal this engine. I spoke to the owner. It's something that he was kind of prepared for, but I personally didn't really want to do it, but I think that's the smartest way to go. All right, so before I take this engine out, we talked about doing a compression check. So I can do it by just putting the flywheel back on. I got the battery reconnected, and the only other thing, because I had to think this through, carburetor was out, so no intake. All the spark plugs are out. So the only thing before I turn the key on is to make sure that the fuel pump fuse is out. So that's inside the glove box. So looking at the owner's manual, you just got to go up inside the glove box and find the 4th fuse and pull it out. So that way, when I turn on the ignition and crank over the engine, it's not going to squirt fuel all over the place when the fuel pump is on. Okay, go ahead and crank. Okay, so we'll stick with 6 cranks, and we are basically at 160, what is that, like 167. All right. 155. 145. This is number 4. 160. All right, this is number 5. That's actually 170. But I got a leak in this valve, so number 6. 165. Okay, this is number 7. 168. Okay, this is number 8. That's pretty good. That's 200. All right, go ahead, number 9. 165. Okay, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is number 10. 165. All right, so this is number 11. Go ahead. 160. Okay, this is number 12. 120. Well, the engine's out on this 400 GT. It wasn't too bad. I mean, there's a lot of little things. I mean, we took the air conditioning out, and what else did we do? We took the oil cooler out. But what was surprising was we didn't have to take the radiator out. I'm used to taking out the radiator, but we actually had enough room that it came out without it. I did end up having to take the distributor drives out, just simply because it gave us a little bit more room, for Matthew and I to pull this engine out without having to hit up against this radiator. But once the headers were out, disconnected, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't a lot of connectors as far as the electrical stuff. The one hang up was that got us stuck was the oil temp sender, which I always forget every time I pull out one of these 365s, is that the oil temp sender at the bottom of the pan hangs up on the frame. So that's got to come out, or else it's crazy how that tiny little sender that's in the pan gets stuck. So you got to drain the oil so that you can pull that little sender out. But after that, it was just a matter of seeing what gets caught, what was in the way, and just muscling the engine out. But now that it's out, I think it's going to be a lot easier to clean and get all this trash out. Looking closer, when I follow these oil trails, I think all of the leaking was from the top, and it was just kind of coming down and collecting at the edge of the head gasket and then dripping down. So I think that's where most of it was coming from. It's pretty wet up front too, because I think this is just all sorts of leaks and oil leaks. This side especially, when you look at this, it's like you follow this oil staining and then it just dribbles down all alongside the engine. So I am putting my forklift to use as a mobile engine stand, so I could clean it. I think what I'm going to do is just spray it down and get all this oil out. Well, my shop is an absolute mess because pulling this engine out, I realized that I really needed to get an engine stand. And then what happened was my engine stand that I have for engines like this is actually occupied down at Francois' shop because I'm building a 330 engine there. But this engine, I really needed to get some work done, and I just didn't have another one available to me. So the only choice I had was to make one from scratch, or at least modify one. So I went down to Harbor Freight, got 2 engine stands, and started putting it together. And you're supposed to order 2 identical engine stands so that you can make them fit together. And then basically, as you can see the way it's mounted, the engine mounts are on the side. I had borrowed a pair of brackets that my machine shop had, and Charlie was generous enough to lend me his brackets, which are these, little brackets that bolt up to the engine block and to a plate. But I didn't want to borrow his engine stand because I didn't know how long this engine was going to be on the stand, and he's running a business, and I just didn't really want to borrow it and then not know when it goes back. I just don't like borrowing tools. So I went ahead and started welding, welding and cutting and fabricating. But halfway through, I opened one, I started modifying it, I started welding the brackets and cutting it and everything, and you have to change the angle because most engine stands come at an angle and they don't turn. You need to turn it horizontally or not longitudinally, or rather perpendicular to the engine, the way engine Ferrari mounts are, and that's not the way American or V8 engine stands are made. So I had to cut and weld and change the angles and get that straight. But then when I opened the second box, which is kind of my own fault, I realized that it was a different engine stand. I mean, they're all the same price, it's the same part number, but Harbor Freight has this tendency to change stuff without telling anybody. So all of a sudden, you've got an engine stand that's different completely. The yoke difference, the yoke size is different, the way the wheels are attached are different, and all of a sudden I'm halfway through cutting the first one and I couldn't turn around and go back. So unfortunately, I just had to figure out a way to make the second one work. Luckily, I just figured out a way and welded it all together and got everything lined up. So once the engine was mounted on the engine stand, I did a couple things actually before that. What I did was I secured wooden dowels to the valve train, took the cams out, and cut wooden dowels. I mean, the trick was to get replacement broom handles or something like that, and they're hardwood. They're just long enough. One broom handle will fit for 2 cams. And the reason why I did this was because I'm not trying to take this whole engine apart. I'm trying my best, although it looks like the engine is pretty much well taken apart. So I'm trying to keep things in place. And what will happen is if I flip this engine over without the cams in place, the buckets and shims will fall out. The problem with buckets and shims is the buckets and shims, the shim diameters are all set. I mean, I just checked the valve flash, everything's perfect. So I don't want to redo it again. If I mix up all these shims, the exhaust valves, the intake valve shims, they're all different because they're made to fit the change for the valve flash. So you need something to hold the cams and buckets, or the buckets and shims in place if for some reason you need to turn the engine over. So what'll happen is the broom handle is captured here, so there's no way for the bucket and the shim to slide out. Or at least you hope. I think it's pretty tight. It should keep them in place. But that is why I put these in here, is just so that it would hold everything in place and not allow the shim to pop out. So I did that, and then I finally got the timing chain chest off. Boy, this engine, I tell you, it is not an easy one to work on. I mean, it's got a double row chain. It's got a chain below that runs off the crank snout that drives the water pump and the oil pump, and then another chain that runs off of another sprocket up here that basically, if I take this sprocket out, it runs this sprocket, and then this sprocket is the one that runs the timing of the cams. So trying to get this all apart was really a mess. But as I look at it, I'm really glad I did, because when you look at the way this engine is kind of glued together, I mean, it's got like, what is this? This is even like an O-ring that doesn't even belong there. Huh, look at that. I don't even know what that is. I'll just look at what's on the other side of the valve of the timing chest. But it looks like someone's been in here before. And look at this. This O-ring has popped out and crushed pretty flat. This was here, but it was supposed to nest inside the timing chest. But I don't know how much sealing that was doing. And the problem with that is that someone's been in here and put all this RTV on this side, did not seal this side. So I think someone tried to seal this a little bit better, and then just kind of was able to get the, I guess, get the timing chest out far enough and then butter this all up with RTV. But the problem with this is if I had tried to do it again, I don't think there would have been any way I could have gotten all this RTV off and cleaned. And then if I tried to put more RTV in here, it would have gotten caught in here, and it would have just found this little path or other little path to sneak by, and it would have leaked even worse. So looking at the way this is done, I'm kind of happy that I did this the right way. Yes, I'm going to have to get a new timing chest gasket. I'm going to have to peel this all off, clean all this off, and reseal everything. And then on this side, you were going to have to put a another gasket on the other side for the oil pump and the. But the other reason why I wanted to do that was because all of this stuff kind of works together. So like if you have one little leak, the oil pump gets its oil feed through this bottom chest. So this seal here is where this is the pickup tube that goes through here. I don't know, again, Ferrari kind of did some crazy stuff. But like if this thing for some reason didn't seal, you have a major issue with oil not coming through there to the oil pickup. And what I was saying was that if you lean this out, you're going to have a problem with possibly sealing it back together again. And when you look at all here, see, look at this. We lost this oil water seal. That was the one that was kind of dislodged. This one's still here, but crushed pretty flat. These were the ones that I was worried about, these water seals, and they're hard as a rock. So I don't know how well those would have sealed. You know, again, I'm looking at all this and I'm just thinking this is probably a good idea to have taken this out. Now let's make sure. So that one had, for some reason, had a little white seal there. I'm not sure why. I'll have to look a little bit further into this, what that seal was about. But anyway, gonna clean all this up and get this ready to reseal and do it the right way and try the best that I can to get this engine back in shape. So I didn't finish taking the timing chest off when I had to go to Cavallino this year. So I just said, okay, well, the work is still here. I'll come back and figure it out, how to get this timing chest. The timing chest was hanging up and I couldn't figure out what was getting caught. So while I was down there at basically one of the biggest Ferrari shows in the country and saw my friends who were in the business, I asked at least 3 or 4 mechanics that I trust and know that have years and years of experience. And I said, hey, have you ever worked on a 400 GT? And they're all like, yeah, a little bit. And I said, how the hell do I get this, this chain off of this? Because I was having trouble getting this guy off, the the 2 oil pump and water pump drives and everything like that, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that. It's got this weird little tensioner over here, and this tensioner keeps everything, and there's a way to loosen it, and that's the only way you're going to do it to get it off. But no one could remember, because it's hard. There's no manuals, or even the shop manual for this car doesn't really tell you anything. I mean, it's just amazing how how little information is out there. So even talking to guys who have worked on these things, they really couldn't give me advice. I had one of them say, oh yeah, I have pictures of it. I'll send you some pictures. I did work on it years ago. This car is similar to a 365 GTC4. And so, yes, it's the same engine, but very few people work on it. And as you can see, this is what happens. They leak. No one wants to work on them. They have problems, and very rarely does somebody want to take them apart this far. But when I found out, it's like, wow, even the guys who are the premier Ferrari shops, they don't really work on these that often. So I'm kind of heading into unknown territory. But what I wanted to say was, thanks for watching and staying with me. I know we're only got a few thousand people that are watching this stuff, but from the feedback that I've gotten from people, the guys who actually care or like watching this stuff, they appreciate it. But I just want to ask you that if you like it, please put a like, a subscribe, or even just share it with people, because that gets a lot more interest for people to get to see this stuff. I mean, look, you can watch all the other YouTube channels about driving them and all the other impressions that everybody talks about, but maybe you'd like to see this kind of stuff, or maybe you don't. But if you're here, just like and subscribe. It really helps me out.